Welcome to the Folk School on Willow Creek, featuring University Distinguished Professor Tom Ezern, singing and telling stories from the salon on Willow Creek.
I need a bed for the night, boys, and my horses need hay. I've been riding that grub line on the hot dish highway. Now, oh Lord, lend me thine ear, the prayer of a cattle king to hear. No doubt many prayers to thee seem strange, but won't you bless our cattle range? Welcome to Willow Creek Folk School number 137, streaming live from the salon on Willow Creek. And I'm not going to lie, it's feeling a little strange here after all the disruptions of recent weeks. Beautiful day on Willow Creek today. The choice of hats for these episodes commonly carries no particular significance. It might be one of the Akubra, whatever Akubra I pick off the rack, or there's a couple of Stetsons on there too, and maybe even a Bailey. Tonight, though, this one, you may remember where this one comes from.
Where?
No. This is from that hat shop on Route 66 in Albuquerque, where went into the hat pan and I said, "Sir, can take that Stetson there and block it campaign style, which is the style of Montana and Dakota Territory in the 1880s." And bless his heart, he said, "Oh, you mean like those Charlie Russell cowboys?" And I said, "Exactly." And he proceeded to trim the crown just a little bit and then block it this way. And okay, why this hat tonight? Because our feature piece here tonight has to do with the open range cattle industry of Montana in 1886. It's a fairly extended story we're going to tell. Oh, our friends, however, know that I might not be quite capable of an extended story, and you hear me croaking a little bit here, so Dr. Kelly has graciously conceded to help tell the story. We're going to kind of tag team the text of the story of the Cattle King's Prayer, a truly classic ballad from 1886 Montana, one that we've had the pleasure of rediscovering, not just another version, but finding the original text from Fort Bend, Montana. And I'm going to kick this off, hon, and under the title of Italian Skies, Cattle Kings and Climate Change on the Northern Plains. Now, oh Lord, lend me thine ear, the prayer of a cattle king to hear. I know many prayers to thee seem strange, but won't you bless our cattle range? Take it.
Tonight's presentation precipitates at the intersection of two lines of research: the investigation of the history of balladry on the Great Plains of North America, which has unearthed the original text of the Montana ballad, A Cattle King's Prayer, 1886, and the reconsideration of the climatic history of the Northern Plains during the Little Ice Age and its aftermath. In the autumn of 1886, the Montana cattleman John Lepley was reckoning with the difficulties of sustaining livestock in an environment that was proving much harsher than Baron von Richthofen and other promoters had promised. In fact, He was about to confront the fatal winter of 1886-87 that would inspire Charlie Russell to paint Waiting for a Chinook. Ironically, it was the extreme oscillations of a warming climate that made life difficult for graziers and their beasts. Lepley pleads poetically that Almighty God, to avert a winter's woe, give Italian skies and a little snow. His song thus illustrates the value of balladry in documenting popular perceptions of the regional climate. Moreover, the discovery of the original text of Lepley's ballad, as well as his identification as author in a specific time and place, situates the canonization of this poetic classic of the open range on firm ground.
Balladry, the composition, dissemination, evolution, and presentation of poetic narrative in song, is a defining element in the literary history of the Great Plains. The well-known standards of the genre, ballads such as The Cowboy's Lament, The Strawberry Roan, The Ballad of Jesse James, Little Old Sod Shanty on the Claim, Home on the Range, they hold place because a century or more ago they were captured from the air by song catchers, ballad hunters such as Jack Thorpe, John Lomax, Louise Pound, Franz Rickaby. The song catchers constituted a canon by default. What they found was what they included. But what they found was some undefined fragment of what was in the air in the heyday of balladry, the final decades of the 19th century and the early years of the 20th. They captured only some of the ballads and only some versions of them. The backup cache of prairie balladry, however, is the archive of prairie newspapers, which, starved for content to satisfy a literate and industrious readership, received and published reams of ballads in infinite variability. Today, with benefit of digitization, optical character recognition, and internet communications, this cache comes available to a new generation, reopening, rediscovering, and relitigating the lost chorus of prairie balladry. Now, within the larger genre, the more specific body of cowboy ballads both benefited from and contributed to the mythic status of all things cowboy, bovine, equestrian, and pastoral in our regional cultural history. Yes, John Lomax has a lot to answer for, but it is true that the cowboy ballads, besides being iconic, lived in a conceptual space different from that of the settler ballads. The ballads of the open range lived by definition in wider, more open spaces served by fewer newspapers, which means that old-fashioned oral tradition held sway. Snapshots of the ballads of the open range, which made their way to newsprint, are thus rare, invaluable documents, all the more so when by happy accident it proves possible to backtrail such creatures to their very origins. As this paper details, the Cattle King's Lament is one of those welcome developments. This is all well and good for those philological wonks who wish to cosset and parse these precious stanzas. But do prairie balladry and cowboy balladry more specifically, and thus the Cattle King's Lament, hold import for the historical enterprise? What can they tell historians and the rest of us about the prairie past? For one thing, they are close to the land. They document the status of the land, the changes in the land, and most important, attitudes toward the land attendant to human habitation thereon. They may even provide invaluable documentation of changes in the land we only recently have begun to fathom, most saliently the progress and impact of linear climate change on prairie life.
Our humble instructor in these matters tonight is a historically obscure open-range cattleman from Montana named John Lepley. Lepley, our balladeer, was born in New York State in 1836, and likely he lived at some time in Iowa, but his resume is curiously sparse. with no U.S. Census listing before 1880. Possibly he was an orphan or estranged from family, and most likely, as he showed up in the gold fields of Montana Territory in 1863, a draft dodger. Lepley never married. He engaged in prospecting in various camps not far from Helena with fair success, and then commenced running cattle on the range along Sun River. In 1873, he registered his J.H. brand in Helena. In 1878, he brought a niece, Carrie Lepley, up the Missouri River by steamer to teach school and attend St. Vincent Academy in Helena. Shortly afterward, on February 8, 1878, the Benton Weekly Record reported that Lepley and 3 other men, all prominent stock owners of Montana, arrived in town, looking for a more extensive range for their herds of sheep and cattle. "Come right along, gentlemen," the editor beckoned. "Pick out your range." Lepley proceeded to locate and stock range in the Big Sag Valley, some 20 miles from Fort Benton, with cattle branded JL on the left hip. When the census enumerator found Lepley in the Big Sag in 1880, he was recorded as living alone on Shonkin Creek. Occupation, cattle owner. Although some thought the bachelor cattleman a bit of a recluse, he could tell a good story, and frequently told the story of the Lost Keys mine in the Bear Paws Mountain, in which he had been offered a stake in 1865. Lepley was a savvy cattleman who founded the Shonkin Creek Cattlemen's Association, organized roundups, and imported registered bulls for association members. The local press referred to him as the Cattle King of the Big Sag. He was a respected businessman, buying property in Fort Benton, serving on a bank board in Great Falls, and holding business interests in other Montana cities. In 1890, he brought out 2 nephews from Iowa to help with the ranch, and their descendants remain in the country. A great-great-grandnephew would become a celebrated local historian in Fort Benton. John Lepley, too, has a place in Western literature, for Charlie Russell made him the subject of a story, Lepley's Bear, in his book Trails Plowed Under.
We have a dialectical story we are accustomed to tell about the experience of cattle culture on the open range of the northern plains, the aggressively entrepreneurial occupation of the land, which entailed the displacement of indigenous cultures, the promotion, capitalization, and overextension of the enterprise in disregard of environmental cautions, and shaping the narrative into a sort of morality play, the hubris and nemesis of the hard winter of 1886 to 87, and the collapse of the pastoral world of the Virginian and Augustus McCrae. This narrative can be faulted in many ways, not least of which in that it fails to fathom the fundamentals of a changing climate. Great Plains historians from Walter Prescott Webb on have been trained to see and reckon with a climate of capricious and massive oscillation. They are not well prepared to deal with the fundamental and linear change in climate that took place as the Little Ice Age, after gripping the land for half a millennium, came to a close in the mid-19th century, altering the scope of human possibility on the prairies. Perhaps a ballad can help open our eyes. To state the historical situation briefly before pitching into that ballad, the cattle kings came to the northern plains with expectations given them by such interpreters of the environment as Walter Baron von Richthofen. He's the uncle of the Red Baron ace flyer for Germany in the World War I, who declared that cattle would thrive on the plains like buffalo, without shelter and getting fat. Snowfalls, he assured, were light. A trifle of wind blows the snow off, and the sun melts it quickly, in consequence of the dry atmosphere. The Baron described the Montana plains of the Little Ice Age, which was no more. On the great American desert of that world, winters were bitterly cold, but open. It was too cold to snow. Thus, despite the rigor of the environment, herbivores and the predators who accompanied them, such as human hunters or herders on horseback, survived and thrived. Once the climate began to warm, around 1850 or so, it also became somewhat more humid and a lot more snowy. In fact, snowbound, making life, specifically access to forage, much more difficult for herbivores and pastoralists. This is why the reign of the cattle kings was not long-lived. It was, in the phrase of Ernest Staples' Osgood, only the day of the cattle.
Now comes John Lepley to the Big Sag, full of hopes and competent to deal with any foreseeable exigency, but perhaps not with what was unfolding around him. The cattle kings, and they embraced that imperious term, even those among them who lived lonely lives in hard circumstances, the cattle kings were willing to believe they had come to a place where they and their beasts would thrive. A quaint, wonderfully 19th century English term encapsulated their belief in the country: Italian skies. In 1879, a Bozeman editor praised the land as one of lots of sunshine and Italian skies. A Butte editor in 1881 enthused, "These are the Italian skies of Montana. Welcome to our hospitable climate. O sons of the sunny South, you can freeze ice cream all year round without artificial aid." The next year, a Helena editor wrote, "Yesterday was the ideal Montana day of Italian skies. There was not a cloud, even as big as a man's hand, in the skies from morning until night." His crosstown rival, not to be outdone, soon would headline the territory as Montana, the land of sunshine, Italian skies, and calm weather. By 1886, range matters around Fort Benton were not so sanguine, as the previous year had seen unprecedented losses. Some feared the grass, for some unaccountable reason, seems to have lost its nutriment, and the cattle are thin and weak. The summer of 1886 was drier than any in a cattle king's memory, and they debated the phenomenon, with sage old hands assuring that there would be fall rains and that the second growth is the best and most nutritious for stock. Prairie fires were frequent enough, however, that the editor of the River Press observed it is certainly the most gloomy outlook that the stockmen of this section have ever had presented to them. To cap the catalog of woes, beef prices were so poor that some outfits declined to ship in 1886, instead turning their cattle back onto the range.
This was the context when there appeared, in the September 22nd, 1886 of the River Press issue, a ballad of 6 stanzas under the title, The Cattle King's Prayer. The editor puckishly noted, "The following was picked up on the streets a few days ago. Who the author is, we could not ascertain." This was a spoof on his part. He knew very well who had penned the ballad, but he was playing a guessing game with his readers. 7 days later, he teased the matter again. Inquirer: "No, Mr. John Green is not the author of The Cattle King's Prayer, which appeared in the River Press on Saturday last." In succeeding weeks, he never did reveal in print the identity of the author. The song passed from initial print into the newspaper exchange and also oral tradition across the American and Canadian Wests. The songcatchers Jack Thorpe and John Lummox printed texts with no specific attribution in their collections of cowboy folk song. The ballad is a popular song or recitation at cowboy poetry festivals and cowboy church services still today. The closest any scholar has come to the origins of the ballad is the work of Jim Bob Tinsley in 1981. Tinsley traced the text to the front page of the Socorro, New Mexico Bulletin of the 30th of October, 1886. This, however, was more than a month after its appearance in print in Fort Benton, Montana. When research for the Willow Creek Folk School last year disclosed the Fort Benton publication, we knew we had in hand the earliest known text of the Cattle King's Prayer. We did not know whether it was the original text or who was its author. We found the answers to those questions in the Great Falls Tribune of March 29, 1930, which published a historic photograph with this legend. Mrs. D. Pemberton of Belt has an old photograph, the likeness of which is reproduced here, which was taken at Fort Benton in 1886 by Dan Dutro to illustrate the reading of the Cattle King's Prayer. The men shown are M.E. Milner, John Lepley, Tom Todd, and the captain of a river steamer. Lepley and Todd were stockmen. In the picture, John Lepley is reading. Tom Todd is at the left, M.E. Milner is at the right, and the captain of the steamer, whose name is not given, is seated on the floor. The newspaper, its photo having fingered Lepley as the author of the ballad, therewith republishes the full text. At the Willow Creek Folk School, upon this discovery, we felt like ballad kings. We now bring you the original text of The Cattle King's Prayer by John Lepley, the Cattle King of the Big Sag, Montana, 1886. We present it in the style we use when depositing a ballad newly discovered and documented into our official canon of balladic literature of the prairies, the Willow Creek Song Bag. If you're ready, Dr. Kelly, I'll grab my guitar. The Cattle King's Prayer, as published, 22nd of September, 1886, Fort Benton River Review. Now, O Lord, please lend mine ear the prayer of the Cattle King to hear.
Cattle King was a spoof term, somewhat derogatory, applied in the early 1880s to speculative cattle operators on the Western Range. Its use in this ballad indicates that the cattle kings, whether in vainglory or self-deprecation, themselves embraced its use. This was certainly true in the region of north-central Montana, where editors, in a friendly tone, spoke respectfully of the cattle kings, noting their comings and goings. For instance, on January 4, 1882, the Fort Benton River Press noted, John Lepley, the cattle king from the Big Sag, spent the holidays in Benton and had more fun than anybody.
No doubt many prayers to thee seem strange. Won't you bless our cattle range? Bless the roundup year by year.
Lepley the balladeer was familiar with the system of roundups as the social and economic scaffold for cattle operations on the open range. The weekly Yellowstone Journal and Livestock Reporter of April 24, 1886, provides the report of the Committee on Roundups to the Montana Stock Growers Association. It delineates the scope and operations of 18 Roundup districts, into which scheme local systems such as Lepley's Shonkin Stock Association would configure. The Fort Benton River Press of April 28, 1886, announces the Shonkin Roundup will commence on May 15, under the capable direction of Captain Tom Martin, who for 3 years has given entire satisfaction to everyone.
Bless the roundup year by year. And don't forget the growing steer.
Reference to the growing steer holds more significance than mere adherence to rhyme scheme. By this time, news reports on regional cattle operations indicate that while the cattle kings were building cow herds, as well as importing purebred bulls in order to upbreed their stock, they also still held fair numbers of aged steers on the range and hoped for an improved market. Some of these beasts were indeed growing. A castrated beast was not classified as a steer until 3 years old, and beasts 6 years of age or older were common. On December 23, 1885, the River Press reported sale of a small lot of steers weighing more than 2,000 pounds each.
Water the land with brooks and rills for my cattle that roam on 1,000 hills.
At the time of the ballad's composition, it appeared the Lord already had answered this petition in the Cattle King's prayer. Concern over the summer drought of 1886 was dispelled by timely rains in September, with the River Press reporting on September 29 that the grass has sprung up with surprising rapidity, and the range is actually greener and fresher than it has been since last May. The warm weather following the storms has resulted in a quick growth of grass. This, with the grass already cured on the range, will supply ample feed for stock.
Now, oh Lord, won't you be good and give our stock plenty of food, and to a bird a winter's woe give Italian skies and little snow.
Italian skies is a term that seems awkward and thus had dropped out of modern versions of the poem. It is, however, a vivid and exceedingly meaningful term used by sodden British folk in reference to the cerulean heavens of the Bel Pais. N-gram searches disclosed the literary popularity of the phrase during the 19th century, but not the 18th or 20th. Montana newspapers were particularly smitten with the phrase.
Prairie fires, won't you please stop? Let thunder roll and the water drop. It frightens me to see the smoke. Unless it's stopped, I'll go broke.
Prairie fires had been a recurrent fear since first occupation of the Montana range by the Cattle Kings. On July 28, 1886, the River Press warned the reports of prairie fires still continue to come in, and unless rains shortly come, there will be a woeful lack of grass on the ranges this year. The River Press printed posters noticing the legal penalties for setting fires and cautioned the ranges are now in that condition that they burn readily.
As you, O Lord, my herds behold, which represent a sack of gold, I think that at least 5 cents per pound should be the price of beef the year round.
Whereas beef prices during the 1870s ranged from $4 per hundredweight up to $5, In 1880, they slid below $4, where they remained. The world surplus of beef, more than the hard winter of 1886-87, brought down the speculative Western cattle industry. The Wyoming cattle boom... Oh, sorry. I'll stop right there.
One more thing, and then I'm through. Instead of one calf, give my cows two.
The Balladier's final petition is a be careful what you wish for proposition. The proliferation of twin calves sounds lucrative, but in fact, twinning results in less vigorous calves, birthing difficulties, problems with heifers refusing one calf, and worst of all, free martinism, that is, infertility of a female calf.
I may pray different than other men, still I've had my say, so now all men. Now, oh Lord, lend me thine ear, the prayer of a cattle king to hear. No doubt many prayers to thee seem strange, but won't you bless our cattle range? Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Do you have any of the good news to share with us tonight, Dr. K?
Well, I certainly do, although some people might have heard me bragging about it already in social media. We've had 3 books pick up some sweet awards.
These are 3 books from North Dakota State University Press.
Yes.
Get the brand out there. Come on.
Yeah, they're not just books that we had here at the house.
Right.
They're NDSU Press books. The first one is Field Notes, which is our first little book about North Dakota. And it's won a national award. We know it's one of 3 winners. So at least it will take a silver prize. Maybe it will take a gold. We won't find out till May or June. Likewise, it's taken an award with the Midwest Independent Book Publishers Association. And we won't know until this summer which place it has, but it will be either silver or gold.
Picking up some kind of hardware, you're saying.
It is.
All right.
And then something that's really heartening, because we took on a project for students to learn how to do letterpress printing. We started doing that in 2017, maybe 2016. Take that back. And those books have been winning prizes. This year, the book that we published last fall is the first runner-up in the Eric Hoffer Award, and that's the highest award we've won with the chapbooks. But it's national. It's really a well-received, considered award. So we're just really excited that that's kind of proof positive that our model for how we're acquiring these chapbooks and how we're producing them 1 page at a time with the students in the class, it's working out well.
Kind of proud of you, Kelly.
Well, thanks. I'm going to try to button my shirt, but I think I'm just too...
Busted out of your buttons, right?
Busted out of my buttons here.
Well, speaking of getting too big, I heard that our friend Taylor Brorby went down to buy himself a hat this afternoon.
Because he had to get a bigger one?
And they measured it, and it came out 7 7/8 because his head has inexplicably grown. With the news that came today that his memoir, Boys in Oil, has been nominated by his publisher, W.W. Norton, for a Pulitzer Prize. So If Taylor's still on the chat line there, he's worthy of congratulations any day, but in particular today. And don't tell me you're not feeling fairly pleased with yourself there, Taylor, and you have every right to be.
He expressed it beautifully. It's been a few hours since I read what he wrote, but remarking about being in the company of other nominees, that this is quite
good company.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
From someone coming from perhaps not literary renown locale. Until he established that.
We do our part, and he's done his.
Yes.
Certainly. You can tell I'm croaking pretty bad here tonight, folks, and not going to be going too long with the Willow Creek Folk School number 137 tonight. And thanks to Dr. K for helping give my voice a break and during the monologue that became a dialogue there. We need to do a couple spring ballads tonight, by God, because we've been finally breaking into the 70s here and putting the dogs out to sleep in the sun during the day, and oh my goodness. And of course, people are finally on the northern plains able to seed because you get some nice drying winds, and sure enough, they're out there putting in this summer's crop. We presume there'll be a crop. Quite a few people in the southern plains, I'm very well aware, do not have a crop this year, and that would include us, Dr. K. I signed the crop insurance claims early this week. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd rather have the wheat this year. I think it's going up this summer, but no.
I guess it looks like beans and butter bread for us.
Well, we got the garden. We should have brought those parsnips out here to exhibit, right?
Yes.
Okay, a couple of things here we'll mention here. These roses are left over from a ceremony inducting some bright young historians in the organization called Phi Alpha Theta. And our chapter here is a part of an international association, an honor society for historians. Now, underneath them here, this thing that is reflecting all the light back at you, I picked up this afternoon on behalf of my friend and colleague, PhD student, teaching assistant, all-around friend, Blake Johnson. Yeah. It's the award of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Science as the outstanding researcher of the graduate students in the entire college in the past year. Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Hey, congratulations again, Blake. It's good that you weren't there because you would have been embarrassed by the things being said about you. Yes, indeed. That's a signal accomplishment right there. And he studies Great Plains history. We want to be sure and mention that. Okay, but these spring ballads. Suzanne, you're kind of a galvanized Lutheran.
They let me be a Lutheran.
Yeah, you're a galvanized. So you don't know about Rogation days, do you? Or Rogation Sunday?
Does that have something to do with hair growth?
No, it does not. But it has to do with growth. So you're half right.
Okay.
Okay, there's this old Roman Catholic set of calendar dates and rituals. Rogation days, major rogation on the 25th of April, and then the minor rogations on the 3 days before the Feast of the Ascension, the 40th day after Easter. Got that? The rogation comes from the Latin term rogare, to ask for God's blessing and mercy. The same way as the Cattle King in our featured ballad of the evening, farmers ask for help of the Lord on Rogation Sunday. It was a Catholic festival established in the year 598. Protestant denominations carried it on. I recall Rogation Sunday as a day of special prayers and sometimes emphasis in the sermon on the fortunes of agriculture. if you look at the literature from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, ELCA, which is your more common sort of Lutherans up here on the northern plains, we read, stewardship of creation is an ongoing ministry in the church. God entrusted nature to the care of humankind. Now, the Catholic Church has particular days in the church calendar for Rogation, but here, churches that have maintained the practice of celebrating Rogation days in our time now no longer mark these days specifically before Ascension. Instead, Rogation days are celebrated at times and places that meet local needs. Themes are thanksgiving for the land, petitions for a fruitful earth, broader cultural celebrations of agriculture and stewardship of the land. It's also not considered anymore solely a thing for rural congregations, but a time to be conscious of our place in nature. This is leading me up to the Sower's Prayer. Okay, this is your farmer's equivalent of the Cattle King's Prayer. And discovered this ballad browsing through the Nonpartisan Leader, the newspaper of the Nonpartisan League, which held power in North Dakota in the 19-teens. The Sower's Prayer, parentheses, after a Scandinavian idea. And I believe that has to be Rogation within the Lutheran Church in this case, Sweden, because the author of this ballad is John F. Talcott of West Hope, North Dakota, and he is a Swede. He's a Swedish immigrant. I've got all kinds of biography here, as well as his draft registration as a farmer. Brown eyes, brown hair, medium height, and the draft board says he's stout. So I presume he's a prosperous farmer. But I also have here a picture of his homestead shanty, and so he didn't always have it good on the farm. But my word, this ballad from 1919, I think you want to hear it. I've put it to what I think is a suitable tune. He gives no tune. Now in the fields I've put the seed, and Lord, I've done my best indeed. Look now with kindness, Father dear, to all the little kernels here. Protect my fields from winds and frost, from every pest, the insect host. Stay with thy hand the tempest's hail. Lord, grant my labors do not fail. Give rugged health instead of gold, for my whole faith your hands now hold. My work, my home, in peace to live is all I ask of you to give. God, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost send rains when they are needed most. But if my prayers too self seem, Lord, give to me as best you I've put to sea. Lord, I've done my best indeed. Isn't that a precious little piece from the prairies? My goodness. Do we have any guests with us tonight, Doctor?
We sure do. Tim Fleckel noted earlier that your earlier song was reminding him of a class he took at NDSU called Cowboy Culture.
Cowboy culture. Now, I wonder, Tim should tell us who taught that class.
I don't know of it. And a friend of ours, Teresa, she says she's glad to hear you're feeling better.
She is too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Teresa Shaniel. Teresa or Shaniel.
Yeah. I'm our little discomforts with the COVID episode here pale in comparison to hers.
What she's been going through.
We sure wish her swift recovery.
Yeah, I think she's still keeping her good spirits, though.
That's good to hear.
I see her still noticing beautiful things when she posts on Facebook.
Excellent.
Yes. Nancy Kelly notes that it's going to be about 90 degrees tomorrow.
That's too hot, Nancy. Nancy, I think you're going to get some rain in July. Just hang on. Oh, everything will be dead by then. Yeah.
Mm.
There are some rains already starting on the southern plains.
Okay.
Our boy Drew reports 2.5 inches where he's working there. Our grandson, who's sort of a deputy director of agricultural operations for the Oklahoma prison system. What a heck of a job.
Sort of? He's more than sort
well,
of.
you know, he says they are getting some decent rains, developing some forage on the southern plains finally. Thank God. Well, so nobody's caused any trouble. Happy to hear.
No. Of course not.
And nor do I intend to tonight. But I must say a word about Melvin Gilmore. You know the guy? Stumped you?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
He's an ethnologist, Melvin Gilmore. Everybody knows Melvin Gilmore, born in Valley, Nebraska in 1868. Took a PhD in botany from the University of Nebraska and is the author of numerous works documenting indigenous life and lore. Particular emphasis on plants. And I'm about to take a look at a passage from his book, Prairie Smoke. Yeah, Prairie Smoke. Because our friends around here are all posting photographs of prairie crocuses. Have you noticed these?
Uh-huh.
They're beautiful.
Yes, I have.
Also known as Pasque Flowers. You know, because they come around Easter, maybe, if Easter is late and spring is early. Pasque Flowers. And Gilmore noticed that there was lore and custom around what white people call the prairie crocus or pasque flower. And that indeed there was an indigenous ballad, a Dakota ballad, which he translates this way. The pasque flower, by the way, is a very early riser. It doesn't happen here where we are on Willow Creek. You won't see any around here in the Red River Valley here, but you get a little bit west into the hill country of the Missouri Coteau, and pasque flowers are busting out all over right now. Translation of the ballad by Gilmore. I wish to encourage the children of other flower nations which are now appearing all over the land. This is the pasque flower speaking. So while they waken from sleep and rise from the bosom of Mother Earth, I stand here old and gray-headed. And then he describes a scene. Gilmore does. When in springtime an old man of the Dakota Nation first finds one of these flowers, it reminds him of his childhood, when he wandered over the hills at play, as free from sorrow and care as the birds and the flowers. He sits down near the flower upon the lap of Mother Earth, takes out his pipe, fills it with tobacco, Then he reverently holds the pipe towards the earth, then toward the sky, then toward the north, the east, the south, and the west. After this act of silent invocation and thanksgiving, he smokes. While the old man sits by the flower and smokes, he meditates upon all the changing scenes of his lifetime. His joys and sorrows, his youthful hopes, his accomplishments, his disappointments, and upon the guidance of the unseen powers accorded to him thus far upon the journeys of life. After finishing his pipe, he empties the ashes reverently upon the ground near the Pasque Flower which he has been contemplating. Then he rises and plucks the flower prayerfully and carries it carefully home to show to his grandchildren. Yes. Well, a Benedictine and Catholic priest named Forster, what's his first name? Yeah. Ignatius, Father Ignatius Forster, who had came to Dakota in 1915 to become chaplain of the Benedictine sisters at Yankton, was reading some of Gilmore's work, and he sort of reworked the ballad. And so I've got that. Now, what I want to say is, this is an interesting historical document, as well as a nice seasonal observance. Father Forster's Song of the Pasque Flower, because he cannot resist. This is at a time when, of course, the people in the old boarding school establishment, through the Indian Bureau and so on, they're trying to encourage white guy habits, right? And concerned about people should take up farming and have the same sort of work habits as white people. And that slips in here. I'm not going to let it quite spoil the ballad, but I'm going to circle back and kind of cover up that part in a minute here. Okay, the Song of the Pasque Flower from 1922. Lovely Pasque flower, herald of spring, proclaiming the hour gladly to sing. Gently thou greetest the winter's sun. Arise, boldly thou peepest, if snow is gone. Callest thy playmates who still do sleep. Arise, lo, spring waits, no longer weep. Slowly they wake and lowly they sigh. Wasn't that beckoning Pasque Flower's cry? They rise in raiments of colors bright. Pasque Flower's garments are hoary white. Noble thy preaching, Pasque Flower brave. Work is thy teaching unto the grave. Lovely Pasque Flower, herald of spring, proclaiming the hour to work and sing. Gently thou greetest the winter's sun. Boldly thou peepest to see if the snow is gone. Thanks for being with us in the salon tonight. Where the deer in the end will all play, whistle down is heard, a disco No, the skies are not cloudy all day. Dr. Kelly.
We now conclude today's edition of the Folk School on Willow Creek. We invite you to join us again next Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time for more songs and stories.